Hello everybody and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Deborah Hatswell and you're listening to BBR Investigations. Wild humans hiding in our tunnel systems. Why is British Bigfoot seen on mining land? Recently I was contacted by a chap who's been experiencing shadow beings since being a child aged 4. These things have followed him through life, and in 2015 he started walking his dog in Elnup Wood in Wigan when things began to change. I've been speaking with Dave and chatting about all the strange happenings he's had up to now, and he's had to face them alone. I think Dave and I may have seen the same thing, along with many others. I'll explain. In the pursuit of some answers, or at least an understanding, Dave contacted a paranormal and cryptid research team from Winter Hill, but felt they didn't really understand what was happening around him and he wasn't taken seriously. What that team didn't realise, and what they were not privy to, was the fact that Dave's experience was also happening to others on the same greenbelt land where they'd taken reports of a similar creature. In fact, both myself, Dave, and a witness in St Helens can get to and from each other's homes using just that greenbelt land. We could be experiencing the same creatures. So I was incredibly grateful that Dave found his way to me. I was also able to reassure him the information he was sharing with me is also happening to other people all across the northwest of England. In fact, it doesn't seem to be just us. It happens all across the country and the world as a whole. As I speak to many of you privately, I know a good number of people within a short drive from Elnup Wood who are experiencing the same activity, not only in the woods that they visit, but also at and around their home. That dovetails out across the UK, and many of you will recognise the type of area that I'm speaking about tonight. The land that we call here greenbelt, land that is not fit to be built upon. It's usually all mining land, left to go to nature, filled with pits that are now stocked with fish. They become wildlife havens, natural green corridors that run between small northern towns like Wigan, Horwich, Rivington. They're left to themselves. They're rarely visited, but for the odd dog water or, jogger or a family visiting with children. But that activity only happens in the day. At night, they are a very different kind of place indeed. Dave, who is our witness tonight, noticed a change in the woodland. He'd walked in for 5 years plus. Luckily for us, he made a note of the changes and the incidents happening to him when he visited there. And he also kept a note of the activity around his home. Sadly, when I recorded our chat, as Dave was in his cab driving, the audio was not great. So in a compromise, I'll be sharing Dave's words myself and adding in any clear audio that I captured at the end of this report. Then I'll share an account taken over 6 years previously by a lady who lives on the other end of the greenbelt land that Dave describes. Neither of these witnesses tonight know of each other. It was only when I was putting Dave's report onto my map that I realised Elnup Wood could be reached by using the same green corridor you'd use to head to my home. Dave will be joining me at a later date for a much better interview, and I will share that with you all, of course, when we do that. I felt that what he had to share was so important that we should just have an initial conversation while he explained to me what had gone on. I also wanted to put him at ease as he approached other investigators, and that can be hard. I remember the same thing happened to Billy, if you remember, our witness from Bolton. He approached a paranormal team and they suggested that he was having just nightmares. And luckily he found his way to BBR as well. So Dave says, I wanted to chat with you, Deb, about a number of anomalies I found in a wood I've walked in since 2015. It's woodland on old mining land, and I know in the US, Sasquatch and other beings are said to use mine tunnels to move around. I know your experience at Beulah fits this pattern, Deb, and over the last 5 years I've noticed and I had some really strange experiences after visiting Elnup Woods in Wigan. A lot of the land here is greenbelt, the stock ponds, Deb, streams and brooks with ample food sources, which I know is ideal habitat. Dave said, I've been watching and listening to your accounts of paranormal events for some years now, and many of the events you share have certain details that stand out. I've been documenting the same anomalies in a nearby woodland called Elnup Wood. The site is on a disused coal mine. The incident I'd like to share today happened in spring of 2021. I have lots to tell you, Deb, but today I just want to share what happened. Please don't think I'm making this up. I'm not looking for attention at all. I've been experiencing weird stuff since I was 4 years of age. My family had to move 11 times because of it. I'm 50 now. But dealing with this alone is getting to be too much. That's why I reached out to the paranormal group. But to be honest, I felt ignored and not believed. I'm ex-army. I spend many hours out in nature. The woodlands are where I feel at home. I understand the rhythm and the flow of the woods. In town, I feel like a different person. I've been walking in Elnup Wood since 2015, and I started to see structure that I've not seen anywhere like before. I work at night, so really in the morning, probably 3, 4 a.m, I walk my dogs in the woods. I started to find these structures made from tree branches. Some of the branches were quite thick in diameter. They were always broken and had no tool marks and no footprints in the soft mud around them. I saw no evidence of a campfire or human debris. In fact, I didn't see anything that looked human-made at all. Some of these structures would vanish or appear almost overnight. I heard a strange call on 9 occasions I was out there. Somehow, I was shouted at by a disembodied voice, and it said the word yod. A simple internet search revealed that this word is from an ancient language meaning go or went. The voice was really deep and gravelly. He said, I've also had a stone or something thrown at me at the same time. I heard the stone land in front of me, but I couldn't locate it. I realised that this might have been a cue for me to leave, which I did. I remember it was the 19th of July, 2022. But I first noticed the changes in spring of 2020. To do my night job, I'm often out about 2 or 3 a.m. It's usually beautiful out in the woods, and you see the wildlife as it moves through the area. And it's much cooler during the night, and I never see any people. They're usually all tucked up in bed. Elnup Wood has 2 mine shafts within it, and sometimes when I'm in the area, I get a strange feeling in my chest, like I know something's around. I don't know how to explain it. It just happens as natural as having a pee. There's also a waterfall there known as the Fairy Beck. In waist-deep freezing water, you'd find a deliberate pile of stacked stones on a log there. They would most often be in a pyramid stack that would change. You'd have to be lacking some senses to wade out into there to build a rock stack. It's filled with old rocks, logs and stumps. In February of this year, 2023, I found a structure that had not been there in the morning. It was made of sticks and twigs in the shape of half a lemon, and it was big enough for me to walk in there. I took a series of photos of it, and some of them came out really strange. It was almost like something had blurred the images somehow. Over the years, I've noticed that my phone can be affected in this area, so now I have 2 phones and 2 battery packs. I charge them before I go out, and on some occasions the batteries completely drain. Even the spare battery packs will drain. In February of 2021, I was with the dogs in the woods and I heard a strange tawny owl call. I'm an ornithologist, so I recognise bird sounds and habits. This sounded like someone trying to sound like an owl. A short series of whistles that were answered from 2 other parts of the wood. I then noticed the dog reacting. One of my dogs went on point and I thought it best to leave, so that's what I did. On the back of that incident, I noticed a change in my dogs. I always let them out for a wee as soon as I'm in for work in the early hours of the morning. And at the back of my garden, there's a strip of woods that leads to open fields. As I'm waiting for the dogs, I hear a strange conversation. It was 2 people talking. one male deep voice and one higher voice, possibly a female or juvenile, but it wasn't a language that I recognised. You could tell it was words and a conversation, but I couldn't tell you what they were saying. Luckily, I always carry a torch with me. I'm usually in the cab. So I went to the back fence and shined my torch where the voices were coming from. And there was nothing and nobody there. My wife then let the dogs out later and she heard a female voice. And she went and looked across the fence. And she couldn't see anything either. Then in March, we had a lot of bad weather and heavy rain. I was out following the deer tracks and I saw one small footprint, a bare footprint that was strange. I took my phone out to take a picture and something told me not to do it. It was a strong urge, so I took note of it and put my phone away. The big toe on this print was really strange. It was almost at a perpendicular angle. And for it, all it looked human, you could tell it wasn't. There was just one print in the soft mud.
These things have followed me home. My wife heard them. She thought I was a crackpot. Absolutely. That's another thing, Deborah, I found golf courses. I found a site. It's Bradley in Standish. There's a sighting on your interactive map of these two ladies walking, driving down this metal road to some farmsteads. And there was this kid with glowing red eyes. Well,
yeah.
So back at that sighting, I found structures, and lo and behold, there's a colliery, or was.
Right.
And there was a mine collapse in 1851.
Right.
And it's about his body, some lads, they're called pit lads, 7, still down there.
Oh.
So you got an onion of layers of things when I feel down there.
You have?
And the hay haul,
yes.
I get gut feelings. I can look at the map and then I get a gut feeling and then a pull. But sometimes these beings in Elnwood, they I would say invited me to come.
Right.
And that's when I got shouted at 9 times. But it's a telepath and a Semitic alphabet, and also it's an ancient British language, meaning go. But it sounded yo, but this was, and then they threw a stone at me. So I should have took the hint, but it took 9 times to tell me to go and throwing an object at me. Then this thick bloke walking to the woods at 4 in the morning. So I thought, actually, I better go. So Elnup Wood was one of the largest woodlands near Standish. So got the dogs, got the leads, they're still walking around Elnup, and everything was fantastic until spring of 2020. And I'll be walking through in the morning. I'll be walking through like at 10 o'clock at night, and there'll be no structure. The next day in the morning, 5 hours later, there's a structure. And I always think whoever's doing it, human or humanoid, but they're on the autistic spectrum, because there's little sticks that have no engine being function for this structure. They look like 2 inches long, these little twigs. And then another time, I would see branch snapped.
Right.
And I thought, no, it must be dead. They must be dead, but no, they're fresh.
Yeah.
So there's no tool marks, no hammers.
Yeah, I know.
And then there was another structure, like it was under a beech tree with a beech mast in the autumn. I could imagine some being 3 foot tall, curled up with a skin tarp, animal skin tarp, with a belly full of beech mast. There's a waterfall in there, and I found, and you'd have to be waist deep in water with submerged rocks and debris. Yeah. And there's a tree branch, quite a substantial tree across this waterfall. September 2021.
Right.
22, beg your pardon. And it was getting dusk, and I know what a tawny owl looks like. I was an amateur ornithologist. So I heard him. Well, that's not a tawny owl. That's somebody taking the pitch. Across the way to the other pitch edge was a higher pitch.
To the answer,
and the other one. Oh shit! We've got to get out of here. And the dogs. I look at them, and they knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
It's the same reaction. I've got one dog called Larry. He's just a mongrel. He he looks around and he's alert and he lifts one of his paws up like a pointer and I know there's something wrong.
Yeah.
So, and then I got this sense of dread and I had to get out there and I ran out there.
Right.
When on the back of that, soon after, I was in the garden and I got back home at 3 a.m. So what I always do is let the dogs out for a week. There's always busting. So we're talking and at the back of my house is a strip wood and then there's a field.
Mm-hmm.
People do walk the dogs, but generally not at 3 a.m.
No.
So maybe somebody was on shift or whatever, I don't know. So I had the talking, and it was a male voice, a deep voice, and it was a higher pitch, what I would consider a juvenile or a female voice.
Mm-hmm. And
not only were they talking, like one would say something, then another one would say something, they were talking together simultaneously towards each other. And it was a language that I can't understand. It wasn't European language, French or Spanish or anything. It wasn't German or it wasn't Arabic or. And it was, I can't. So I always have a torch in my pocket at work, inspecting the lobby when I'm at night. So I tiptoed to the garden, the fence at the back of the garden. I shone my torch over, nothing.
Right.
Nothing. And also my wife, a few weeks later, she let the dogs out about 1 a.m. to let them out for a week. Mm-hmm. And she heard a female voice, and she looked across. And then she couldn't see a damn thing either. It was March this year, it was quite a bit wet weather.
Right.
And I was following these deer tracks. There's that many deer. It's so easy to follow the deer tracks. Yeah. And I found one smallish footprint, and I was going to get my phone out to take a photo. Mm. I got this strong, overwhelming sense, don't do it. Yeah. So I didn't. It was a child's thing. If you imagine the big toe, to the small toe on the foot, it was a left foot. It was such an acute angle. Mm-hmm. It was humanoid. It wasn't human. It was humanoid, and there was one footprint in the soft mud. It was one.
Myself and Dave chatted about the similarities and what he was reporting and some of my experiences that I hadn't shared with him, and a number of other people who were experiencing the same thing. I spoke to Dave before I shared anything with him, and I was able to reassure him that he wasn't the only person to see them, as most of us call them, because we don't really have a name for them here in the UK. The Americans do, and the Canadians. In fact, most countries in the world have a name for these wild humans. They're often described as forest folk. One witness I work with called the one she saw the woodwalkers, and I like that. She lives in Lincolnshire. And they all see them in the woodlands, and then eventually at the back fence at home. Why? I don't know. But let me share the stories of the others, and you decide for yourself. Now, I've been in contact with one lady in the northwest of England since the end of 2018. She's contacted me once or twice a year and kept me up to date with what's been happening at home and on her walks. What she saw, she described as a huge grizzly bear without a tail, and it happened around 74, 75. She said, I wanted to share an experience with you that I had that happened when I was much younger. It'd be better if I start at the beginning. I contacted you as I think we've seen the same thing. The first time I saw one of these creatures was when I was about 8 years old. I was around maybe 74, 75. I grew up in Standish, St Helens, and I'm still in the same area. The greenbelt land that sits opposite my home at the moment is somewhere I know well, as I grew up there. I played there as a child. There's a railway line that splits the two green spaces in half and goes through there. I lived with the land they live on behind me for a long time. It's made up of two big wooded hills, and surrounding that there's woods. It then runs down to the railway line, and the land I live across joins that railway line. In the 1970s, it was far more rural. There were more open land, fields and woods. The house I live in now was built in 1978, so you can imagine how vibrant it was back then. There used to be a quarry in the middle of the woods, which is now disused. The quarry is now filled with water, and over the years, and locals use it now to fish or swim in it. I played down here often as a kid, and I was doing that when the experience happened to me. I was at the bottom of the woodland, and because we'd built a den down there, and I'm on my own. I've got to watch it, and all the other kids have gone in for the tea. And then I set off for my tea. And I remember it was really warm. It was the middle of summer, quite hot. As I was going back to the entry point of the woods, which was a hole we used to squeeze through, I got a dreadful feeling that just washed over me. I've never forgotten it. Everything went suddenly deathly quiet. There were no birds singing, no rabbit or fox noises. Nothing was making a sound. It was completely silent. The sun was still up and bright, and I started looking around me to see what had changed, and about 60 yards away, I saw the back of what at the time I thought was a huge black bear. It looked like a huge grizzly bear without a tail, and it was bent over eating something, and it stank too. I remember that smell also. I did not know what it was, but I knew it was too big to be any kind of dog, as we had a dog at home that was half German Shepherd, half Labrador. This looked like a black wolf. Anyway, I ran as fast as I could all the way home. I told my mum what I saw, and she went mad that I was over there alone. She said it was probably a big dog, as we have no bears living wild now. But I know what I saw. Its coat was a bit like the colour of our dog. It's a weird shade of black, but when the sun catches it, it looks like it has red in there too. It scared me so much I didn't go over there again until I was about 13. And although I pushed the experience to the back of my mind, there was always a question mark over whether what I saw that day was a dog. I just never went over there alone after that. Now that I'm older, I think they've always been here. They seem to pass through the area in the summer months. I tend to ignore them as best I can, but I still see them. They've never bothered me until I took some photographs of them. And there's this big one stood out at the bottom of our road in front of the street light. So its features were blacked out, almost like a silhouette. But I could see the outline of him perfectly. It was like, I know you see me. Well, I see you too. The locals are leaving food over there now because they think the baby foxes are eating it. I'd be interested to know how to tell these creatures to back off, just in case I need to in the future. But to be fair, Deb, they don't bother me. Like I say, they're usually in an elevated position on the bank, and I think they watch us from there. I've heard them make screeching noises like a monkey before when I've been walking the dog. I'm not sure what they are, but sometimes they put leaves on their faces that look like a mask, and they're not there all the time. I think they're using the woods and the fields as a stop-off point when moving from one area to another. When I'm out walking my dog at night, I'd hear whistles and sometimes even screams coming from that area. At the bottom of our avenue, there are also fields with overgrown bushes surrounding them. I was walking the dog later than normal one night, about 9:45, and when I approached the fields, the dog refused to continue, wouldn't go any further. At that point, I was only about 50 yards away, when I looked up to see what she was looking at, and there, under the streetlight, I saw something standing there. It wasn't fully out of the bushes, but you could make out there was a figure standing there, which was all black in colour, had massive shoulders. The outline looked like a bigfoot that you see on TV or YouTube. I will be honest, it scared the living daylights out of me. I wasn't close enough to see any features. I was so shocked I thought I was dreaming. And then it just merged back into the bushes. I sometimes think they know I'm aware of them. I haven't told anyone else because people will think I'm mad. But I was talking to another dog walker who had seen something strange. He said what he saw, he presumed, was an old, dirty-looking man standing in the bushes with just parts of his face showing. When the dog walker asked if the man was okay, this dirty old man just sort of merged back into the bushes. And when I say bushes, they're extremely dense and over 10 feet tall. Judging by the size of the tree and the fence and the stump, this must have been about 7 foot plus tall and at least 3 foot wide at the shoulders. I didn't hear them much that year. I figured it was due to lockdown. But then in September, I was walking the dog and the trees in front of us started moving. There was lots of screaming and screeching. It just sounded like a chimpanzee, but louder and deeper. When I spoke with our witnesses in June of 2020, she explained that that year things were not the same. She'd noticed a lack of changes or lack of signs that they were around. She said, "This is the first time they've not turned up. I don't know if it's because of the lockdown rules, because everyone has been in the gardens or walking their dogs more than usual. Plus, while the lockdown's been enforced, we've had some major road repairs all around the area where I think they stay. There's been lots of noise and disturbance going on. There's a hill on the other side of the railway line, and I think there are woods all over that. Thick underbrush, brambles, and thickets are hiding. And maybe over there it's quieter." I got to agree. The same thing happened to me when I started noticing them signs around them. I got a good 18 months interaction. And then somehow they got through round the environmental laws on the green belt and they built 1,000 homes. And they moved about a mile and a half down the track. I started picking sign up somewhere else. And I've heard other people say that. She contacted me again and said, "Hey, Deb, I think they're back. I've been out with a dog. It's August. It's really hot. And I heard these monkey noises again. And the next thing, the trees opposite me were moving. And there's this loud screaming. Again, it just sounded like a chimpanzee, but louder and deeper. I can't think of anything that it could be." That's the same stretch of land where a number of boys in the early 80s saw what they described as percher. It's a local legend. And it's this dark thing that's out there on the mining land where the pits have been filled, you can fish them. And it's said to shake trees violently. And on a number of occasions, hairy legs have been seen and a red-eyed creature as well. In February of 2020, she contacted me again to let me know that they were back much earlier this year than normal. And she said, "Hi Deb, if you remember where I live, I can see onto the greenbelt land. As it's greenbelt, it can't be built on, as it woods and paths out there, and the local dog walkers use it in the daytime. At the top of our road, if you turn right, it takes you past a row of houses on the left. And on the right is the land that runs from my house right up to the railway track that leads to the bridge. Once you cross the bridge, you have a row of terraced houses on the right with greenbelt land behind them. On the left is another park. The far end of the park is a road that leads to an even bigger park with a huge lake in the middle. It was quite rural here when I was a child, but not now. There's been a huge boom in building new homes. We've had a few incidents lately where some of the locals have described a hairy homeless man who's seen hiding in the bushes. The local gossip is that a dog walker was grabbed from behind by this smelly hairy man and he was trying to drag her into the thicket. Luckily, her dog chased him off, but she ended up on the floor and only saw an arm come from behind her. She said it must have been a homeless man. Have you heard anything about this, Deb? It's been quiet for the last 18 months. But I put that down to the building work that's still going on." Another incident that happened was a man. He was a dog walker and he was cutting across there and he said that some face appeared out of the bushes. And he only saw a face. He assumed the face belonged to a homeless man, as the other locals do. He said this homeless man face just blinked and then he merged back into the thicket. He was described as just smelling like a dead animal. Talking amongst ourselves, the locals all think it is just a homeless man. I know it's not, because I've seen them. Anyway, there have been some developments on the land as you approach the railway bridge. The land on the left has been sold, so there have been builders on there fencing it off with an 8-foot fence. This week the council are also there, loads of them, like an army cutting back. They started cutting back the woods that grow on the side of that road. So what was a 1-foot wide path that runs all the way around is now 8 feet wide without any cover. This isn't some kind of land management thing. Even the branches and blackberries have all been cut down. It's madness. I've lived here for 27 years and the council have never done anything like this before. Apparently, there have been complaints by the building contractors that children are hiding in the woods and throwing stones at them. Once those houses are underway, I don't think our friends are going to be around anymore. They'll probably find a different corridor to roam. Less than 2 months went by, then things began to change again. Hi Deb, do you know if these things move trees or plant trees so they can make better cover? Because in between the bungalows across from our house, I've seen the outline of a big one again, and he's standing in his usual stance. He's hiding half behind a tree. I should have taken a picture, but they never seem to come out on my phone. With your eyes, they're as clear as day, but on the images, they're blurry and hard to see. I know they have some kind of shield that makes them blurry or distorted, because when you catch a glimpse of their face, look away and look back, the blur seems a bit smaller somehow. That big one, though, doesn't give a shit if you see it or not. People around here are always leaving food over there, because a family of foxes live in the thicket. Anyway, I've seen it for a few years, and I've seen it for the last few days on the run. The next thing I noticed was there was a new tree planted in front of the oaks, and those oaks were where they would hide among. I asked the woman in the left-hand bungalow and right-hand bungalow if they'd been planting trees, and she said no. There must be more people in the northwest who've seen them, Deb. I've asked my neighbours across the road in the bungalow who put the new trees in the side of their house. She said they just appeared overnight. She hadn't seen anyone plant them, and she hasn't got a clue how they got there. I asked if she'd seen anything weird happening around her home, and she said no. But they have a conservatory at the back of their bungalow. I don't. And they usually only use it in winter because it's far too hot in summer. Maybe that's why she's not seen them, but I have. Deb, it looks to me like they're travelling via the fields and rural places, even when they're right close to houses. They seem to use the embankments to move around, and there's a lot of rural space between here and Wigan. In the same kind of land as where you live, Deb, on that greenbelt land, it's filled with old mine pits stocked with fish. There's lots of food and arable fields with small pockets of houses you could get from my home to yours just using the railway lines. I wonder which way they've come from when they passed me. Maybe if you find that out, you'll be able to track them seasonally. I've experienced all of the same things as our witnesses tonight. The images that you see now are mine, probably from around 2018, I think. I've seen them in the woodland to walk my dogs in. I've seen my dogs too scared to walk in a woodland they used to be happy in. At first, you'd just feel them around. And then after I accepted that, I'd see like dark running figures on my peripheral. Over a period of 2 years, they got closer and closer to my home. We'd hear loud bangs and smashes on the railway line that was directly on my back fence. When we first moved there, my husband was looking for firewood and he chopped down one of the old trees on that embankment. And throughout the night, we heard a racket and a number of trees were pushed over when we went out the next day. You'd hear thuds at night that you could feel. And on several occasions, we heard growls close to the fence and around the home. Once, I managed to get them on camera after a footprint find. I was out with my daughter and we were walking around and we came across a footprint in the wet, boggy. In some patches, it's really swampy and it's not peat, but it resembles a peat bog. It's moorland. And it's all mining land. It has loads of hidden shafts and areas of deep water and there's seismic meters and all sorts out there. It's not the safest place to be. My daughter tracked those prints that we found and they were filling up with water as she did, so it wasn't far in front of her. And they led to my back fence and then simply vanished. And I found that really disturbing. My granddaughter found a structure and I went out with a BBR member and couldn't find it. It had gone. I've also seen structures that appear and disappear overnight. These are green structures used with trees that are still green. I've also seen, and someone was with me and witnessed it, a path change over the weekend. It was always been there. It's the same path that everybody used. And I went to use it, and at one end of it and the other end of it, 2 bent oak trees that were still green were laid there, and it looked like there'd never been a path there. I don't know how to describe it. I've had locals tell me they say they've seen bears down there, and a dog walker neighbour reported a missing time event. What is it about this old mining land that brings forth so many strange events? We hear bird sounds that are clearly mimicked, owls in call in the middle of a rainstorm. We hear strange chatter just out of reach in a language you don't recognise, even hearing your name on occasions. Stones are thrown. Gifting happens where you leave something and a pattern is changed. I once left an entire tub of peanut butter out there. I thought it was crackers. An entire tub of peanut butter, lid on and everything. And it went. And Mark said, yeah, it'd just be an homeless guy, something like that, Deb. And it didn't come back for about 6 months. And I goes back in and I go where I was doing my marbles and my crystals. And this tub's there completely clean, left there as if it wanted filling up again. You know, it's strange, isn't it? Some of the photographs you're seeing now, they're just, you think that's not normal in a British woodland, you know. But there's so many of us. I mean, if you've been affected by something similar, it's happening around your home or, you know, the area where you walk your dogs, get in touch. And I can put you in touch with so many of us that are going through the same thing. I think of Steve in Cannock Chase, who's been followed home. Laura in the Midlands, same thing. Polly, a recent witness who saw the shaking trees, then saw a dog scared at home. There's a chap in Afton Forest, Wales, experiencing exactly the same things. Structures that appear and disappear, almost overnight. David, Hanson Brook, lives where he did as a child. His dog won't walk in those woods anymore. He hears owls. Figures you can see but not capture on camera. Howls and screams in the middle of the night that your neighbours notice. The lady on Pennington Flash saw a monkey man. She said he melded into the bushes. The witnesses to Perchman, Derek on the Medway, May in Colbin Forest, the family at Deeside visited by a creature at the window, the family at Loch Ness, the farmer at Harwood Forest. These are just a few. The list is endless. And me, who saw them at 15 and have tried to avoid them for decades. What happens next? I don't know. All I can do is collect and journal these reports, collect and collate the evidence, and hope that one day me and the others might get some answers. But for now, I rejoice in the fact that I am no longer alone. Good night, everyone.